Well, I'm not saying you couldn't, I'm just saying, I think most people aren't going.
All right. I'd like to call to order the January 6th, 2022 Plan Commission meeting. Could I get a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ford. Let's skip forward. We'll go to Culhane.
Present.
Kays? We're muted.
Nope.
Hey, I apologize for that, those of you that are online. So we were just taking roll. Chairman Brink just opened the meeting, so we're just in the process of collecting roll.
Present.
Okay, Kays.
Present.
Aletsky,
Present.
Dargis Johnson,
Here.
Hanson,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
and Brink.
Here.
Okay, that leaves Dolly and Spire absent.
Thank you. We have a full quorum. Third item on the agenda is invitation for public comment participant submittal. If there's any planning items that are not on this agenda that you wish to speak about, please just let Stacy or some other city staff know, and we will have time at the end of the meeting for that. Item 4 is approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion and a second?
I'll make that motion. Oletsky.
Second, Colleen.
I actually have something to add, if you wouldn't mind. We would like to add under the discussion section, which we also could do under new business, but I would like to add it if you see fit under the discussion portion, the draft parking ordinance.
Would you like to amend your motion to include the draft parking ordinance?
Yes, I would.
Second.
All right, we have an amended motion and an amended second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same side. Motion carries. Fifth item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the December 9th meeting. Could I get a motion and a second for approval?
So moved, Colleen.
Second, Dargits.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item 6 on the agenda is our regular agenda. 6A is Commission consideration of Resolution 2022-01, an amendment to the ordinance. Stacy, will you take over and fill us in on what that is?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is an ordinance amendment to the concept plan section predominantly. We did find a few inconsistencies and a few things. As you remember, this was approved not too long ago, but now that we have been working with it for some time, we did find a few things that we felt would be good to clarify in an attempt to kind of streamline things. And then also another kind of primary goal of this ordinance amendment would be requiring more general drainage and street information at the concept plan level, and then getting into the more detailed engineering drawings, reports at the preliminary plan phase. That was one of the goals, if you remember, of going with the concept plan. So this kind of just further refines that a little bit. I can walk you through some of these changes if you'd like. Basically, we don't need 4 paper copies. 1 copy and an electronic copy is all we need. So we took advantage of that. Under streets, we're actually taking the street width out. We're just wanting to know right away widths at this point in time because they haven't probably fully designed their street yet. So, to basically allow for a concept to be brought forth, approved, that type of thing, and then getting into the nitty-gritty of the details, so of the engineering details. So drainage and grading here, this language is basically referring back. It just is I think a better way to say proposed drainage and grading plan, if you will, rather than preliminary drainage, because that language actually matches exactly what's in this post-construction stormwater best management practices manual in this particular section. So wanted to clean that up, make that easier for the public to understand and for applicants and consultants. One of the other changes that came up, and this is a discussion with engineering staff, basically adding the drainage ways or detention ponds in as a minor change. That's something we felt was appropriate as staff in order to move forward. A lot of that is calculations and making sure things are working in terms of grade and drop and that type of thing. Again, this is actually matching the exact language in that stormwater best management practices manual. That's kind of a mouthful. So wanting to make sure that we have the exact same language there for ease of public use, I guess. And again, amendment to preliminary plan. We do have a couple things here. Again, we wanted to be consistent with a minor change on the drainage ways or the detention pond location there. Making that a minor amendment. And that's a quick run through of the changes. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Yeah, it's always good to clarify and get consistency. And if we say, drainage plan in one spot, we want it to say drainage plan in another, or vice versa, or whatever it is. So appreciate you making those changes. Is there any questions from anyone on the board?
Stacy,
Yes,
I do have a question on the where you're scratching the drainage ways and the detention ponds location being something that you guys would just handle.
Yeah. So I think that, and I'm not sure if Justin Peterson's online or not, because I think he was a major player in this as well. That's something that we felt would be, sometimes they don't necessarily know until they get all of their engineering work done. They probably will have an idea where the drainage pond's going to go, but just due to the natural topography, grading, that type of thing, there's usually only a few places maybe to go with it. So I think that was the idea, is kind of leaving that a little bit open-ended, if you will, until they get more information and further along with their engineering drawings.
This is Ford.
Go ahead, Diana.
I guess I don't agree with changing the drainage ways and detention pond locations from major to minor. I think of a lot of times, a lot of issues, neighborhood issues, people unhappy in this city come from drainage ways and detention pond and water activities. And in my mind, anything that involves where water's going, how it's flowing, where it's going to be stored is major. And I believe that should be something that we look at. and should still be classified as a major change.
That is one way to look at it. I look at it too from the technical aspect of it, meaning it's very much something that's very, very engineering heavy, very engineering related, and lay people. Even like myself, I mean, we can look at the general grading and things, but in terms of looking at coefficients and different types of things, I leave that up to the engineers. So I think that was predominantly some of it. So I do see both sides of that. So good discussion there.
Yeah, and then I'm going to chime in. I tend to agree with Stacy on this one. Our engineering design standards for our stormwater usage in Watertown is quite involved. I applaud our city staff for having that. It's a very good stormwater manual. And to me, if they can look at that manual and say, you know, this area has these types of soils and it produces this volume of water for runoff, we need X size pond at this location, I feel that the engineering staff is the right people to answer that. I know, you know, Diana is completely right that we do get a lot of confrontation with drainage areas, and that's just because the person downstream always doesn't, you know, I mean, they never want the water to come, so that's why they're always here with those concerns. But when we're answering those concerns, we lean so heavily on, you know, the engineering analysis to provide us with those answers, and we tend to go or, you know, agree with what they say. I feel that I would be inclined to agreeing with moving it to minor, but again, I see both thoughts.
In that light, let me ask you this question, and perhaps this will satisfy me. So a minor change does not come before the Plan Commission, correct?
That is correct, yes.
So do people, these neighbors that we're just discussing downstream that don't want the water, where do they have a chance for input? Would it only be if it was left under major changes and they could come to the Plan Commission and speak? Or is there another opportunity for them to speak on this issue?
No, for the drainage, that is something that is a good point, that basically they could speak out again. Typically, we're going to see an engineer on the applicant side. Of course, we have a team of city engineers here, and Justin Peterson is online, our city engineer, and may be able to help us a little bit with this. But it is something, too, where it gets very technical in nature. But you would lose that public comment if that was moved to a minor as proposed. To answer that question, Diana, yes, it would.
And that's my big concern, because we do have so many people, so many citizens who, granted, don't understand the engineering, but given the opportunity to at least voice their concerns, they've had a chance to speak. If we move it, we've taken that chance away from them. And I'm looking at the individual citizen and not allowing them to lose their voice on an issue that has been a big issue in this city.
I will open the public hearing. If there is anyone online or in staff that wishes to comment on this, please feel free to step up to the mic and state your name for the record. Any other thoughts from the board members on this? Are there any other issues that we have with any of the other changes, or are we just looking at kind of the amendments to the preliminary plan, minor, major?
I guess I'm with Diana on that. I mean, I'm not even going to, claim to know what the world's going on. That's not, I don't think that's what our point is on making that available to the public. Because like you said, I wake up and all of a sudden the detention pond that was supposed to be on the other lot, on the other side of this development is now out my back door, I may just feel a little bit miffed. And again, it's probably the best place for it, but I wasn't given the opportunity to at least be explained some kind of notice. I don't know. I just don't know if it would be better, if we're just better off appeasing the people, making that an opportunity as opposed to, having a riot in our chamber when we're having the meeting, when it's all said and done. It might just be a better way to handle it. Not necessarily that this board knows more than the engineers, because I don't think we do, but I just think it does give the public that opportunity.
That definitely raises a good point, for sure, in terms of, we definitely strive to be transparent with the public. So you make a great point there.
Hearing no one from the public, I will close the public hearing.
Mr.
And I'll
Chair,
look for
question.
Go ahead, Mr. Case.
So, I'm making sure I understand it. So this is only on the minor, it's only on the minor drainage changes, correct?
So this actually would pull the minor changes and allow for these minor changes at the staff level for drainage ways or detention pond locations. So someone could change their detention pond location or a drainage way location and work with the staff to do that.
And so what would be the basis for the staff to change a minor location? I mean, when we're talking a minor location, you're probably not talking about putting one from the northeast to the southwest corner of the property. It would be something within the same general area with maybe a minor shifting to accommodate, or maybe the size or something like that. Isn't that what we're talking about? I mean, otherwise you'd be having to redesign the entire drainage for the whole thing if you're talking about moving something from 100 yards or something like that, correct?
I would say it would be somewhat unusual to move it to a completely new location. I suppose there would be a way to say drainage ways or detention ponds, like minor shifts in or something of that nature. Again,
right now we have design standards that address drainage for the city that spelled out how it has to be, where the best places to go. We have engineers on staff or contracted with that review those drainage plans. Currently, correct?
That is correct, yes.
While I understand, at the time of the initial concept plan and the things where we're at the planning commission, the people have the opportunity to come in and speak, I don't think you're going to see things change midway through a development. And if they're following the design standards, and the design standards are probably going to dictate the best place for those drainage facilities to be located under engineered standards, I'm not necessarily certain what role the planning commission has in that design, when we basically have already said that it's really something outside of our bailiwick.
That is correct. I would think it would be a unique situation if it were to completely shift, from one location clear across the property to a completely different location. I think most of the engineers are designing in accordance with design standards and also with the topography of the land as practical, as much as practical there. So
you say are you saying that would never happen, Stacy, or is it possible that it could happen? Is it possible that it could happen?
I suppose it might be possible. I think it might be rare, depending. I'm going to see if Justin is able to hear us here and let him chime in on that, since he's actually the one reviewing these drainage plans.
Yeah, this is Justin Peterson. I've been listening to the conversation. I've been trying to think of an example where it has changed drastically. The changes that I'm thinking of are really just minor. They're maybe potentially it gets a little bit bigger, it moves slightly. But I'm trying to think of an example where there was a major change. Now, your point, could it happen? Yeah, I'm sure there's a possibility that it could happen, but as Commissioner Case is saying, it's engineers don't want to redesign if they don't have to, and they generally just choose the location that makes sense for the drainage from the beginning.
Mr. Chair, did you close the public hearing?
I did close the public hearing.
I would like to make a motion to approve. I would like to make a motion to approve as presented by staff.
Second, Colhane.
We have a motion and a second. One thought I had is, do we want to break this apart, or even can we? I mean, there's some parts of this that are just language changes and updates, you know, going from 4 copies to 1 copy, things like that I think are pretty clerical, that I think most of us would agree on, if not all of us. I don't mean to speak for anyone, but is there a way that we could or would want to vote on that and then make this drainage a separate issue, or even can we do that?
I suppose you could.
And I don't know, maybe I'm making things more complicated. Is that something that we would be interested in doing, or do we want to just take this all as one? And
I prefer to separate it because I'm perfectly think it's a great idea to go from 4 copies to 1. That's appropriate. So I'm fully in favor of that, and I would hate to vote against that because I'm fully in favor of it. If it's possible
Mr.
to
Chair.
do that.
Yes,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairs,
Case.
I'm not sure if the parliamentarian is there. There is a motion on the floor, discussion on the motion. If someone wants to make a substitute motion, they are more inclined, they can do that. We can take action on a substitute motion.
Okay. So, yeah, so the procedure would be if someone wants to make a substitute motion to approve a portion of this amendment, and then we would vote on that first, and then make another motion for the preliminary, for the,
Then the motion, then,
Yep.
yeah, then if a substitute motion is passed, then it would be a motion to approve as amended.
so is there an interest to make a substitute motion?
I would have interest in making that substitute motion as you just described.
So there's a motion.
Split out the drainage area, the major and minor changes to a separate motion.
Okay. Do I have a second to that?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on that? So just to clarify, I believe we're voting on everything besides the drainage on that motion.
We're voting on the amendment to the original to do that. So
Yes.
there's either way, there's 2 more
The
votes, right?
The motion on the floor as motion is second would be to separate the drainage discussion
Okay.
from the original motion.
Okay. So Colleen's
So
right that there's,
if the motion is carried, then the motion moving forward would be a motion to approve without the drainage. If the motion fails, we're back to the original motion to approve as presented by staff.
could you say that one more time? It kind of went over my head.
Thank you, Commissioner
All
Case.
All right, so I made the motion and second to approve as presented by staff.
Yep.
Diana and a second has been made to separate the drainage portion out from the motion. So we are now acting on Diana's motion. If her motion is approved, then we're back to the original motion as amended to only carry forward the staff's recommendation without the drainage. If Diana's motion fails, we're back to the original motion to approve as originally presented.
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion?
So here, an I vote would be to just take the drainage out. A nay would to keep it as staff originally presented.
Okay. All right. All in favor of that amended motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign.
Nay,
Nay, or aye, or
nay.
nay.
Okay.
Nay on the, I'm
Mr.
opposed.
Chair, I'd like a roll call vote,
Yeah,
please.
we'll do a roll call vote. Stacy, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's go with Hanson.
Nay.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Kays,
No.
Culhane,
No.
Ford,
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
Okay.
That's 4-3. Does this just need majority?
Yes.
Okay, so it is. So now we're splitting
So
it.
now we're back to the motion as okay, I'm sorry. Diana's motion prevails, so what is being passed on to the city council now would be a motion to amend, the ordinance without the drainage. Sorry about that. COVID's got me a little fuzzy right now.
Okay, so we're splitting out the drainage,
'Cause
but I'm not sure that it was. I'm not sure that it was actually a recommendation to
Yeah.
remove that portion. I saw that as more of a let's let the board decide if we should change that. I'm not sure if that was the intention.
that was kind of what I thought it was too, Stacy, that now we still need 2 more votes on this item. Because now we're gonna split it out and do 1 vote.
Okay, the original motion like Kay's was to approve as presented. Ford moves to approve a substitute motion, approve the ordinance without the drainage. That motion has been passed on a 4-3 vote.
I'm gonna interrupt you there. I
So
think she did a motion to split out the drainage so that we could look at it separately. So I think we can still look at this right now as let's make sure we get the clinical stuff taken care of, and then let's vote on the drainage.
Yes.
Is that correct, Diana?
That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So I think now we would be looking.
So we moved under Diana's motion to approve as is without the drainage, right?
It was a substitute motion, Todd, I believe, just to split out the drainage section and look at that separately and have a separate vote on that. And then,
I think Culhane was right with his original assessment of that we'll still need 2 more votes on this item. We'll need a vote on the clinic, everything but the drainage, and then a vote on the drainage itself.
That's how I see it. That's how Ford sees it.
Just to comment, I would trust Kay's parliamentary procedure over my own. My guess is he's read Roberts much more recently than I am.
I just guess my understanding is I made a motion to approve as presented. Diana's Ford was okay with everything else in the ordinance except for the drainage. That was the substitute motion. When it passed on a 4-3 vote, then that substitute motion kills my original motion to approve as is, and we just approved forwarding it on with everything except the drainage.
The only
That's how I would parliamentarian it out.
Yeah, except for I don't think that her motion was that she approves it everything besides the drainage. It was I approve splitting this out and talking about it separately.
Okay, so if that's the case, then it's an amendment, substitute. So that's an amendment to the motion. So we're back to the original motion as amended. If
we're
that's
back
what
to the main motion.
Those that are on the prevailing side on the 4-3 want to state it as that. So we are back to motion as amended. So it'd be another vote on my motion amended to strike the drainage based on Diana's motion. Does that make sense?
No.
I don't.
So what is
Chair,
it?
if I may.
Okay, so those of you on the prevailing side, what did you vote for?
What I voted for is let's have 2 more votes. Vote 1 will be let's clear up everything besides drainage, because I think that'll go over very smoothly.
But you already did that with a substitute motion. I'm sorry, but the parliamentarian in me says when Diana made a substitute motion, my motion goes aside. And you act on the substitute motion. Now, if her substitute motion is to amend my motion, that would be an amendment to the motion. And then that we would come back to a vote on everything except for the drainage. If her motion is a substitute motion, that would take mine out and say, we're going to just deal with everything on staff recommended except drainage. You guys just voted on it and passed it. That's the parliamentarian in me.
So Todd, if we go with that way, we only have to make one more motion. We've already passed the drainage and moved it back to, left it in major, and now we just have to vote on the clerical things. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying is that if the intent of your motion was to say, yes, we'll approve everything but the drainage, now we are at a motion. We approved your motion, which is now we're back to the table with a motion to approve as amended. So that we're voting on my motion to say everything. We've added yours to strike the drainage, and so we're moving things to the city council to all the clerical stuff, and that's a motion to amend. If you had the intent to circumvent my original motion and just say, no, I don't agree with that motion, I just want to have a motion to approve everything but the drainage as a separate motion, we just acted on it and we're done. So you just have to tell me what the intent was.
My intent was to remove the drainage from your motion and vote on it.
Okay, so now we're back. So that was a motion to amend.
Okay.
And now we're back to the original motion as amended.
Okay.
So we
Which is
have a
just the
vote.
clerical.
Yep, which is just the clerical. So, Mr. Chair, what's before the board is a motion to approve as amended, striking the drainage portion out at this time. Correct, Diana?
Yes.
And I apologize if I made it confusing. When I said there's two more votes, I intended that to mean that there's a motion on the amendment, which passed, in my perception, and then the motion on the and then another vote on the motion as amended, as Mr. Kays has described. So I apologize if I confused you, Brink. I don't think we get to vote individually on each prong of the idea.
We're there. Yeah, we're back. We're good. I think we're just back to saying clerical. Let's look at it this way. Next vote's on clerical only, right?
Yes, this is clerical. This would honestly be main motion as amended, and a motion. Basically, this would be approving as amended.
Okay. So then after we take that vote, are we going to talk about drainage?
No, we move on to something else because that's going to be a public hearing, right? We've already, we have to come back with that.
Okay. One other option, and Todd, please help me if I'm wrong on this. We could have a motion to reconsider if we're confused, I believe. I mean, if
where I'm at with it right now, you've scheduled a public hearing.
Yes.
Based upon ordinance that's been drafted.
Yes.
We are coming in here saying we are taking something out. If we are going to substantively change the original intent of the ordinance that's being proposed, that has not been noticed to the public. So in my other job, in reality, we would take a time out, if you want to talk about what changes we want to do, we can do that and schedule another public hearing. But I think it fails the public if we are adding things to the stew without them being aware that we're adding things or changing things substantively.
I think that the Plan Commission has the purview to make some amendments, and I think this amendment to strike that language out, I think that would be fine. I don't know if Mr. Roby's on here, but I understand, Mr. Kays, if it was something very substantive, because really then it would just be putting it back to the way it was.
Agreed. I mean, I think where we're at though is procedurally, we have a motion to forward the clerical stuff down. Let's deal with that business, and then if the chair at his purview wants to have a discussion on the remainder of it, and then from there I'll let the board go with what they want to do. Well, let's break it out in bite-sized pieces.
Thank you, Commissioner Kays.
Yeah, and I didn't when I made my original suggestion, I wasn't trying to overcomplicate things. I thought there's one item in this whole thing that there's discussion over, so I wanted to try to take care of everything else. It sounds like that's not what happened, but that was all I was trying to help with, and I think that's where Diana was trying to help with too, is let's make sure that we at least get some of it taken care of, but I'm not
Let's
sure.
vote on the clerical.
Okay. Can I get a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ford,
Yes.
Culhane,
Yes.
Kays,
Yes.
Oletsky,
Yes.
Dargis Johnson,
Yes.
Hanson,
Yes.
and Brink.
Yes. Motion carries. Amended motion carries.
So I guess the question is procedurally, is there any way to revive the drainage discussion? I tend to agree with Commissioner Kays that I think that it's dead. The drainage, at least for tonight's purposes, it's dead based on the amendment.
I think you could have a motion to reconsider, though.
Well, the way I see it, guys, if indeed they never change that drainage, and we leave that in there, that if there's a major change, that's the only reason it comes back in front of us. It's just a safety net. Because if they're never going to really change that, you aren't going to bring it to us anyway. Correct?
Yeah, and I think it was more written for the minor shifts of maybe enlarging it a little bit, or maybe it's,
But-
10 feet to the south or something like that.
Well, and your wording says major changes. To me, making the
Right.
pond a little bit bigger is not a major change. Moving it from one corner of the development to the other is a major change. So I think that staff is, like, again, you guys are well more equipped than we are to say that's a minor change. When you're now affecting neighbor B instead of neighbor Z, that's a major change. I think that's just the safety net in place. So I don't think having those 6 words put back into the ordinance is
Okay.
going to be a big deal.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, if that's, we can take, so essentially then I want to just make sure we would take 24.0605 and basically put it back to the way it was, as well as 24.0610. And that would be the recommendation moving on to the city council.
Correct.
Okay. I always wanted to make sure I had that. So, okay. Very good.
Okay. I guess we will move on. Won't make suggestions anymore. Item 6B is discussion on proposed ordinance to the Gateway Overlay District. Could you fill us in on that one?
Sure. Absolutely. This is something I'll just say that Brandy worked on. So hopefully I can kind of get through this, if you will. So this came about. We had the board look at a couple different variances for the transitional yard. And it was recommended a while back from the board that we take a look at this transitional yard requirement so we could still keep the greater aesthetic standard of the district, but not make it overly cumbersome for the applicant. And where this really comes into place is on the smaller lots. So the Gateway Overlay District right now regulates that only 15% of the front yard setback can be used as gross parking area. The front yard setback varies from 20 to 30 feet depending on what street the lot is adjacent to. So this amendment proposes that the percentage only be applied to lots greater than 40,000 square feet, as it is difficult for the smaller lots to meet the parking requirements with that particular restriction. The purpose of the ordinance is to have green space adjacent to streets instead of large expanses of pavement. Currently, there are only 4 lots under 40,000 square feet within this particular district. We are talking about East Park Morris Additions, that particular area. There are existing landscaping requirements within the district, so that will help soften the parking lots with the tree plantings and such there. So the last major change is to allow dwelling units may be permitted in the same structure with other non-residential uses. So essentially what this would mean is we could have mixed use, provided such residential use is located above the first floor. So it would function much like our downtown, our C1 district. The one exception to that would be no dwelling units, of course, would be allowed with a motor vehicle service station. So that would be a conditional use. So,
Stacy, can I say something to that?
yes.
I see no dwelling units will be allowed in conjunction with any motor vehicle service station. In
Yeah.
conjunction seems like a huge gray area. If you want to
Yeah.
be specific, it would be no dwelling units will be allowed with any motor vehicle
Agreed.
service station.
Agreed.
That's what you want to say.
Yes, agreed. So we'll look at that in the particular ordinance because that is very helpful, Diana, on that. So the underlying district parking requirements will need to be met. And the primary reason the board reviews mixed uses as conditional uses downtown is because of the C1 not having the off-street parking requirement. That was a staff report. So let's jump in and look at the particulars here. In the ordinance. Again, this is a discussion. This is for getting your comments or feedback, that type of thing. So we're not voting on anything tonight, but we are seeking your feedback. So if we look at 21.5404, dwelling units may be permitted in the same structure with other non-residential uses, provided such residential use is located above the first floor and all floors shall contain only one use. No dwelling units will be allowed in conjunction with any motor service station. Motor vehicle service station. I'm sorry about that, you guys. So basically, we do have that conjunction here again. That is something staff can wordsmith and basically make that firmer. So no dwelling units will be permitted with any motor service vehicle station or in the same building as. So something like that, we could clarify that if that's an issue. But the general concept is the board okay with allowing mixed use in here except for above motor service vehicle stations. So that's, I think, the discussion point there. And moving on here, setbacks. The front yard setback is in accordance with their requirements illustrated in the following table. The percentage of front yard setbacks used as gross parking area shall not apply to lots that are less than 40,000 square feet. We talked about this again. It does make it tough when you have those smaller lots. And so the proposal that staff has brought forward for discussion purposes is just basically eliminating that requirement for these smaller lots. Transitional yards. Transitional yards shall be 5 feet in width. And if we think about that, it does make it a little bit more understandable. And so 5 feet on one side of the lot line, 5 feet on the other. So you will see a 10-foot grassy area. So again, transitional yards shall be provided with grass. Fences or other screening devices may be located within the transitional yard.
Stacy, this is
Yes.
Diana again.
Yes.
I have a question about number 2 and the new number 3.
Mhm.
Transitional yards shall extend the entire length of each respective property boundary.
Mhm.
Yet number 3 provides you with an exception to that.
That is
So,
correct.
You're saying in one spot, it will extend the entire length. And in the next point, you're saying it doesn't have to extend the entire length.
I think that it should be written as an exception. I think that number 3 should be written as an exception. So basically, it has to run the entire length except for access points that are between interior lot lines that meet the engineering design standards.
Something similar to that.
Yes.
Otherwise, 2 and 3 are totally in conflict. And which one do you follow?
Exactly. No, I see that. That's a good point, Diana. And then transitional yards shall be grassed, maybe I'll wordsmith that a bit. Planted with grass or something like that. Fences and other screening devices may be located within the transitional yard. So yes, if somebody wants to fence it, I think that's appropriate there. If the board sees otherwise, let me know. So that's a minor change, it looks like. So those are the major changes. This one basically is saying additions to the principal structure which conform to the provisions of this chapter, and all accessory buildings or structures shall be of the same architectural design and general appearance as the principal building. It did say constructed of the same materials as the principal building. So I'm thinking that is, we want something that relates to it, but they may not be able to get those same materials. That it has been an issue for folks within the current economic climate. So we want something that complements it, is generally in the appearance, but they might not be able to get that exact same material. So that's kind of the ordinance amendment. We can definitely work more on this if you have specific changes, wordsmithing or otherwise, and you'd like to send this to us within the next week. We'd be happy to work on some of this. Like I said, this is a draft, a first blush, that type of thing. But are there any concerns with the principles or the intent, I guess, of this?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Case.
The Peepers actually reached out to me a few weeks ago about a proposed project out there in that development, and brought it to my attention of some of the issues that they were dealing with. And I know I'd had a conversation with the city urban planner as well about this. I think if we go back to when we did the Holiday Inn Express out there, we went through a variance process and came up with the 5 feet on both sides for transitional that would allow for some grass and some drainage. I think that would be consistent with the decision that we made in that area. Being that I think there's only 4 or 5 lots that this would apply to that are smaller than the larger, more boxy store type lots that we have in this development, I think it would allow for some more flexibility in design. And so I support the changes. I think Diana brought up a couple good points as well. There might be a little wordsmithing to be done, but I think the overall intent I support.
And we appreciate all the comments too with this, because worst thing is, it might make perfect sense to the person that wrote it, but then trying to apply it, or when the public gets a hold of it, then there are questions. So we appreciate all of the comments. And again, if you have wordsmithing suggestions or whatnot, don't hesitate to send them to us. That type of thing for understandability, clarity, that type of thing. And I'll make it a point to look through this a bit more as well. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next item on our agenda is open public comment, where we were going to talk about the ordinance amendment that you handed out about the parking.
Yes. I'm going to try to get to that here. It's hot off the press. It does need some work. I'll pull it up, and I think I can email it to you, Diana. Can you see our screen pretty well?
I've got you on my TV muted, so I can see you on my television.
Oh my gosh, no. I'll pull it up, but then I'll make sure to send it out by email to everyone, so you have your own copy to mark up as you wish here. So this potential, or this parking ordinance, has been something that the Plan Commission identified. We did have that 2-year list of goals that you all approved a while back. And this has kind of risen to the top, if you will. There's a few businesses and a few reasons for kind of moving this up. So we wanted to get this in front of you, kind of walk you through some of the major changes, see what your comments are, or if there are any concerns. So I'll quit talking and pay attention here and get this pulled up for everyone. Okay. So it is opening right now. So basically, what we did is we added a couple of things up here for safe and functional parking. This is basically why do we have a parking ordinance? Well, it's to do these things. Then here I have kind of highlighted the numbers that are new, but probably not substantial changes. But where it's the heavy highlight here with all of the sentences, that would be something I feel is a pretty substantial change. Since this is a rework, we didn't do the track changes because it's a full rewrite, I would say. We tried to do the track changes, but it just got too messy. So again, this is basically saying we want to take a look at your parking. If you are going to construct, reconstruct, or add spaces, we want to make sure that it is in compliance for landscaping, for the sizes, for the drive aisles, making sure that they're not, the spaces aren't located in the site triangle, that type of thing. Permits are not required for simple things like restriping, chip sealing, overlays, or minor surface work, so long as the landscaping or the drainage is unaffected, that type of thing. A major change here would be within the commercial or industrial district, off-street parking facilities may be located within 300 feet provided there is a direct pedestrian route to the property. A shared parking agreement would be required when parking is located off-site.
What do those three words mean? Direct pedestrian route.
Direct pedestrian route usually would be some sort of sidewalk, walkway, crosswalk, that type of thing.
So we can put a block away from a C1, C2, or C3 district. You could have off-premise parking in a parking lot in one of those residentially zoned properties. Or is it only in a commercial industrial? It says within a commercial industrial district, off-street may be located within 300 feet.
Yeah.
So that's only property is zoned commercial industrial, or am I inferring that I could have a residential zone property a block away and I could put parking there?
Good point. No, I think that it is only for commercial or industrial property.
Okay.
So, yep. And I can clean that language up. So I'm going to make a note here. So this is something a lot of communities have. I'm sure that many of you may know. It does provide a little bit of flexibility, that type of thing. But I'll clean that language up. That's a good catch.
Another thing, Stacy, there, I mean, I've seen that in the C1 district, that language very common within 300 feet. It might be in a residential zone to allow for things like in a C1 district because we don't have that parking capacity. That you could put a parking lot a block away in an R2 or an R3 district, as long as it's adequately screened and lighted and those types of things. So you might want to look at that because I know we've, for example, in Lake Norton, where I've done some work, they're building a brand new, they built a new cheese plant, and they've had to go out and find, parking a block or two away that's in a residential zone. So rather than rezoning it to a commercial district, we've just allowed that off-street parking as a conditional use in that residential zone, supporting that industrial commercial use. So that's something that you can think about too.
No, I think that's a good point. Definitely we can look at that, and I'll double check, but I'm thinking in our residential district, it is a conditional use. So maybe that is something to note there. Some locations it may make sense. Other locations it may not make sense for that type of activity, but it does provide some flexibility. Number 6 is a major change here. It's something that we have tried to work on. I know that we've had a fair number of mixed-use developments coming forward, which we, generally like to see. It fits the vision of the downtown, that type of thing. But as more and more are coming, we have had more and more parking questions. So what this attempts to do, and I've seen this in a few different communities now, if a use is requiring more than 70 parking spaces, then they will have to provide the excess parking in accordance with the chart here. So they would have to provide for parking if it's over 70 spaces. That's the best that I've seen, I guess, for ordinances out there.
Stacy, so if you hit that 70 threshold, are you then responsible for providing parking for whatever that? So now you just have to provide 70 spaces as soon as you hit whatever the dwelling unit requirement is, or
15. Yeah, it'd just be for the excess, excess parking. So I can work on that a little. I thought about that when I wrote it too, that maybe that isn't quite on track there.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Stacy, give me again. So like when we're building the new apartments downtown, if they weren't putting underground parking, do we have any requirements for off-street parking for those? Just say the three new apartments. Are there any parking requirements for them to build an apartment downtown?
No. We don't have any. We could look at something about residential uses. Some communities use that as a trigger, but I thought, maybe just kind of be fair.
I'm thinking we had that question the last time. If I'm building an apartment with 24 units and they're not going to put underground parking underneath those buildings or whatever, I think they should be required to have some place for off-street parking that's not the main street, because I think that infringes upon commercial development opportunities downtown.
Sure. And I guess there's a couple ways to go with that then. The 70 spaces is just sort of a placeholder. If the Plan Commission liked this language, we could work through what you would find appropriate. It could be 50, that type of thing. I saw 70. I think the Brookings ordinance has 70. Maybe, I can't remember where, maybe somewhere in Iowa, but I looked at so many ordinances, they're all kind of running together now. Or it could say something like for mixed use development or for residential development within one.
I think my preference would be if you have any residential development that exceeds more than 2 units or what have you, I think you need to be providing some sort of off-street parking, or if you're not containing it in the building itself.
Chair.
Okay. That's something we can look at.
As it relates to off-street parking in the commercial districts, I mean, obviously this goes to sort of a philosophy, but the whole strong towns approach, I mean, the first maneuver is to get rid of the off-street requirements. I understand that there are instances where we might want them, especially, but even requiring parking after 70 units are required, all you're going to do is you kind of end up shoehorning all the developments into 69 unit developments, right? I mean, that's what happens. And so I can see where if we're going to build a giant apartment building downtown, we might want some off-street parking, but maybe we do it as a fractional thing where we say half of the normal required in an additional one. Because I could see where it'd be helpful to have 20 or 30 off-street space.
So maybe 50% for
something like that. When we talk about our downtown, parking is the lowest use and it generates no sales tax revenue. I understand that we all need to park, especially on a day like today. We're not all walking around. We're a little unique that way, Watertown. But also it's a low use of land. It's incredibly costly. It's prohibitively costly for the developers in some instances. So as it relates to our downtown, I will, fight against, I'm going to be real particular about any requirements about that, because I feel
absolutely
what ends up happening is then you end up with knocking down a bunch of buildings, building small buildings, big parking lots, and then
no, we don't want that.
And now you've hollowed out your downtown, or you end up building 69 unit apartment buildings
Sure.
because we've got a 70 cap and it would cost $2 million to add underground
Yeah.
parking or something like that.
So that's a very good point. So when we kind of talked about, you alluded to the 50% of the regular, is that for residential uses in the C1 then? You thinking maybe half of what's required that they'd have to have? Because I think that from what we've been seeing, I think they'd be meeting that,
Yeah.
from what we've been seeing. But is that the intent is just looking at residential? Or are you looking at the like retail area as well?
I think
office.
strictly residential, because I
Okay.
guess I foresee it.
Yeah.
The potential being a problem is when you've got 100-unit apartment space, you got
Yes.
200 people living there in
Yes.
theory, or up to 200 or 300 people are living there,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody's got a car. Okay, and now you've got 300 cars parked downtown.
Sure.
Now your entire block, or maybe 2 blocks, is taken up. I get
Yeah.
that we might need to. Maybe we want half of those off street. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
that does make sense too, because I'm thinking about like for snow plowing and stuff like that. I mean, people maybe, if they're living there, maybe they're not regularly moving their car as much and that type of stuff. So it'd just be better to have that off street. So if the
flip side is I think that, the city has a responsibility downtown to maintain nice public parking, and I think we do it. We do a pretty good job of that. But we could always do better.
Sure.
And that should, in theory, there's a lot of slack with that these other places don't have.
Sure. No, that's a
I'm
good
with
point.
I'm with Liam on that. I mean, I think the parking policies that we have is probably not adequate for the type of development that we've had in the last, several years downtown. All good development, and we don't want to have policies that's going to preclude people making investments downtown. But we do know that, if I'm going to come in with a commercial use that's not a stereotypical Main Street, if I was going to come in and build a new county fair, for example, I'm going to probably make sure that I've got enough adequate parking to at least address my customers.
Yeah.
Right. And if I'm going to be building, a 30, 50, 60 unit apartment building downtown, do we need to have all of it contained on site? Possibly not. But we also know that there are going to be people that are using, Main Street parking and walking 2 blocks to live, and then people are going to be complaining to you that no one can get to my store.
Sure.
And
Sure.
and again, I don't know whether or not you guys want to hear those complaints or not. So those are the things that we got to somewhat weigh the pros and cons on.
No, I think that's a good suggestion. If everybody's comfortable with that, I'll pencil that in and get that changed. Another thing I wanted to just quickly bring up, a lot of ordinances do have this sort of staff can have a reduction in the number of parking spaces up to 20%. In theory, if somebody was going to do that, we'd probably want to require a parking study or show some other similar uses or something of that nature, not just willy-nilly approve something like that. Again, probably I think the justification would be just to not bring something to the board for a variance if it's just short a couple of spaces here or there, or if it really does maybe fall between a couple of different uses, that type of thing. So wanted to see if the board was okay with that.
Fine here.
Okay.
For
Anybody?
me.
Yeah, I'm all for that too as well, Stacy. Something that we don't have to see, an incidental thing.
Okay.
I mean, again, you probably should maybe just flesh out what some of those justifications. I'm looking at more from covering your own tail.
Yes.
You
Yep.
know?
Yep. Parking study. It could be justification from the EIT manual, things of that nature. So
I think if
Right.
they're getting justification through a parking study, I mean, I don't know if we would need to limit it. I mean, if they came back with a parking study and say, I only need 50%, I mean, I would think I don't want to hold them to 20% if they're paying to do
Oh.
a study.
Okay.
You know?
So then
that's my thoughts.
Okay.
I mean, I clearly want them to be able to reduce it, but I would hate to not be able to reduce it enough if warranted.
Sure. You'll see a big long chart here, and I hate to do this because I really wanted to keep it simple, but what we have now is I think pretty inadequate, because really there's so much difference in some of these uses, and you'll see that I very much bumped some of these up going along a little bit of the strong towns. Most communities still do have minimum parking requirements. Some communities have minimums and maximum parking requirements, that type of thing. So, but I felt like I bumped these up quite a bit. Just let the businesses decide, try to get something that's more of the minimum. One in particular that I wanted to run by you is the sports arena and assembly hall. This is pretty common. For what you see out there, it'd be one space per every 4 seats, plus one space for every 100 square feet for non-fixed seating. So I wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to cause an issue with anyone. It's very common out there. It was the most common one that I ran across. So there's that one. As well as general retail. A lot of places are 1 per 200. Bump that up for 1 per 300. Again, large format. A lot of places are going away from all of this parking because it simply isn't being used as much. Maybe it never was, but again, are we planning for, Black Friday, which is once a year, that type of thing, as people are doing more and more online. Environmentally, it's not great for drainage and heat and aesthetics, all of those things. So wanted to do this. This number's getting to be pretty common in some of the up-to-date ordinances. So that is a little bit of a change there. Mixed-use shopping centers. This is something I want to be able to look at a few in town because it's nice when you know it's going to be mixed use. You might not know. Somebody might be building a spec, that type of thing, and then you can kind of go from there, 1 per 300 or 1 per 225. So makes things easy. I've worked with an ordinance like that. Worked great. So and then there's all these other things. So probably the best thing to do is let me know if you have any concerns with any of these. So I don't know off the cuff if the 1 per 4 on the sports arena and assembly hall sounds reasonable. Again, retail 1 per 300. I don't know. I'm not seeing any eyebrows really raising too much. So, but again,
Stacy,
yes.
on the sports arena assembly hall, have you had discussions with the ice arena folks to see if that's consistent with what they're proposing? Because that's going to be the first one that we probably will apply this to.
Yes. Yep.
So
That's
that was my question. If that's within their plans, and I'd hate to have to go through a variance process or something.
correct.
Because
Yes, that's a good question, Commissioner Kays. And for transparency, that is what they're used to seeing around the country. And again, with my research, it definitely seems to be, 90% of areas, or at least 80, are using something pretty similar to this. So yes, it is something that they would be wanting to design to.
thank you.
You're welcome. We did try to clear up some language here under hard surface with asphalt or concrete. And then in the I-1 and I-2, we thought it might be okay for gravel overflow parking spaces in truck routes. That's just overflow. That's not required parking. Again, you get too much paving, you get runoff, that type of thing. We beefed up number 6 here. As you know, every community has this, and it's not an easy thing to enforce, but maintenance of parking lots. Big potholes, curb and gutter maintenance, snow and ice removal, that type of thing. Making even landscaping to some degree, especially when it's required, it gets tough. Also, having some language in the ordinance about alleviating dust and mud tracking, that does tend to be a problem sometimes as well. So just wanted to have something in here in the event that we do have some major potholes or something that's in really, really poor condition, for the city to be able to hang our hats on there. So
how does that work when I know one specific parking lot that has a lot of potholes and consternation for many years? I mean, so what happens? They don't fill their potholes within their parking lot, and we go after them for a $500 zoning violation. Are we going to take the next step and actively fix it and go against taxes on their property? I mean, that's because technically that's what you're saying here.
Yeah.
Is that you're maintaining your parking lot, but what if they don't?
Well, I think that's the thing.
And is zoning and it's more of a legal question probably for Matt. I mean, what's the end game?
I think that, it's definitely could be a zoning violation. You could get the, fine, and that could be each day it'd be a separate offense. So that could add up over time. As far as actually fixing it and billing them, I'm not sure if we'd go that far. So I would like to visit with Attorney Roby on that, City Attorney Roby. Because it's not something that we're hoping to do. We want to work with people on it as best we can, but there have been a few situations where it just has become impossible, and we keep getting complaints, and it's now more of a safety concern, really, too. So. Yeah, we don't want anybody to, lose a tire, bend an axle, all those things. So, but anyway, certainly I will send this out to you by email. Make comments if you would about the next week or so, and hopefully we'll have everything to bring this back in front of you, as well as some of the comments for the gateway overlay. So those are a couple ordinance amendments that we are working through. We have a lot more to work on, but we're trying to, piece by piece, make some changes for the betterment of the community. So
Thank you for all your hard work.
thank you. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate all your comments and suggestions. It helps so much to have an active and engaged plan commission, because it makes perfect sense when you're writing it, but then when you go to enforce it or something, really appreciate all your thoughts. So thank you.
Do we have any new business?
We do not.
Do we have any old business?
We do not.
Any reason to go into executive session?